All right, I think let's get started. This is a very unusual year. I'm not sure what to say, like good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I guess it's all correct. We are all from all over the place, at least for our panelists today. So welcome to the ASEAN panel, and so we're gonna try to keep everything on time. So we're gonna start by me introducing the panel. We'll go into the discussion right away. And my plan is to leave the last 15 minutes for the audience to ask questions that you might have. All right, so let's get started. I'll give some introduction to our esteemed panelists today. So start with Mr. Pocholo Reyes, who is currently the president and CEO of NTT Data Philippines Incorporation. Mr. Reyes has almost 20 years of experience at the Philippines company and has done extensive work in research and development, as well as internal IT and marketing operations. During his year as a senior consultant, he spearheaded the adoption of key business initiatives, such as the adoption of Microsoft Solution Framework as a set of guidelines for engaging DB wizards technology implementation among customers. Mr. Reyes has continuously ensured proper people development and efficient resource management processes during his time as managing director. He holds a bachelor degree in computer science from De La Salle University and graduated from the executive program at the Ross School in 2007. So that Mr. Pocholo Apoch. And the second person, Mr. Alfonso Emanuele de Leon, is the former VP Asia Pacific of Estee Lauder. He describes himself as a brand builder, global citizen, visionary, and coach. Mr. Emanuele was named the 2018 Executive of the Year of Italy. He has over 20 years of experience building and running brands through values, brand charisma, storytelling, sustainability, and direct consumer engagement. He also has unmatched expertise in luxury retail and consumer experience. He now owns a branding and retailing consulting business based in Milan and Hong Kong. He studied in the US and lived and worked in Italy, Spain, UK, and in China and Hong Kong. During his studies in the US, he also had a chance to be a part of Ross School MBA semester exchange program. So everybody here have some association with U of M in some capacity. And last but not least, Brandon Carney, CEO of Citibank Singapore and ASEAN Consumer Head at Citi. Carney has an established banking executive with a strong track record of transformational leadership. Actually, this is like a very buzzword at Michigan, the transformational leadership. He has worked in countries such as Portugal, Belgium, Poland, South Korea. Mr. Carney's expertise in business transformation is evident in his work as a consumer banking head from 2012 to 2015, when he was able to reduce headcount, streamline the branch network, increase digital usage, and increase sales volumes. In addition, he launched an award-winning and top-rated mobile banking platform in South Korea, which increased digital usage by 50%. He holds a bachelor in economics from the University of Michigan, but an MBA from the Warren School. Sorry, and for not a strong note here, but that's all right. At least you are one of us. Go blue. All righty. So no further ado, let me get started with the questions, and I just want to remind you that we'll try to keep our time. So I'm going to be quite strict, and I'll have to manage the time, make sure that we all done within a time limit that we have. So let me get started. So we have a set of questions, and maybe we'll start with something more general for all of you to share with us. So maybe we'll start with first asking you, each of you, to describe the motivations for your business to expand in the countries that you have worked or worked in? Did it require your company to use a different strategic approach to enter and penetrate the ASEAN market as compared to many probably other regions you have experienced in the past or you have known? So I guess we could start at any order, whoever wants to start first. Brandon, I saw your hand. Is that, want to go get started?
That was more of a shrug, but
I
can
can. Sorry, you got a cold call. Let's get started with you.
Yeah, so for those of you who know ASEAN, and I'm sure Poch and Alfonso can chime in, ASEAN is, the markets are very different. So I look at, I look after Singapore directly as the CEO of Citibank Singapore. Very affluent, very small, 6 million people. We have, a handful of branches here and less every year. And very self-contained. Actually, this is one of the, I call it a very nice white collar prison right now because we can't travel. So, it's just not like in a lot of countries, in Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, you can't travel internationally, but you can travel domestically. In Singapore, you can go about 10 minutes and that's it. So it is, it's been a year since I've left the country, and Singapore is a very small country. But so when we look at for Citi, obviously ASEAN is broader, but for Citi we cover 6 markets. So it's Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, and Vietnam. And they run the gamut from Singapore being highly banked, heavily affluent. Probably 95% of consumers have a bank account. And then on the opposite end, you got Vietnam, where it's just a land grab. And not much affluence, not much wealth management there, but only 4% of Vietnamese consumers have a bank account. So it's just a land grab in terms of how fast and how quickly things are evolving, and they're just jumping right into like a digital only banking model. And then Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand are somewhere in between on the spectrum. So one of the things we do struggle with a bit in Citi is, where we tend to have a very wealth management focused strategy. And, but then we have these, we have presence in markets where that's really not fit for purpose. And we're trying to pivot so that we can use digital to have a branch light, digital only mass market approach without having to have, a massive, infrastructure. And that seems to be a winning strategy for us. So we've really had to, look at, the ASEAN is not a monolith. I mean, it's just, country by country, very, very different. And we've had to adapt our strategy accordingly.
I'd like to echo what Brendan mentioned. I have similar experience as a provider of technology. We are present in many countries across Asia Pacific, 9 countries now, all the way to Australia, where we are somehow. I'm also part of governance team taking look at the Australia operations, and one of the things that we struggled a bit in the recent past was trying to do things consistently across the region. And areas where we struggled is the differences in culture and the maturity levels of the countries are so diverse and different, and it's impossible to do everything consistently across the region for us. So what we have actually adopted is, we said, maybe 70-80%. We, as much as possible, we do consistently, but we have a room for specific implementation or engagement in different countries. As Brendan mentioned, there are totally different situations in different countries, Philippines and Singapore. So many things different between what we do in the banking space. And unbanked here is there's a wide gap of unbanked in the population here in the Philippines. And then for the Philippines, we're probably going to do somewhat like a China, jump straight to fintech and electronic wallets and all that kind of arrangement, and supposed to everybody going to the traditional banking model. And I think that alone, that's one segment that's we're talking about, and there's quite a in different areas, different levels of maturity across the ASEAN region.
Yeah, I can only concur to what just said by Posh and also Brandon. I actually completely agree. And my perspective is maybe a little bit closer to Brandon's experience, because it's like B2C in a certain sense, coming from Estee Lauder, which is a kind of luxury cosmetics and retail, because we used to own stores. So I'm talking on behalf of my experience as Estee Lauder, not much as a business owner right now. And it's true that if although we like to talk about Asian, we like to talk about Asian or Southeast Asia as one entity, and if you look at it, it's very interesting, because it's like you have this micro region with macro region with 650 million people. No? If you put it together, it's like the fourth economy in the world. Is expected to double in the size of GDP in the next 10 years. But and it's very, very young. 50% of people is below 30s, so it's very, very interesting. But so we kind of look at that and we say, well, that could be like what is the EU, what it could be something like the European Union as a project. But in reality, the diversity between countries is stunning. And I would like to start more than on the business, on a personal side, is what makes it so fulfilling and enriching, and having a job that has to deal with all these countries, because it's the countries have much more diversity between one and the other versus the European ones. And but of course, then the business approach is more complicated. And I mean, if you take, I don't know, Singapore and Philippines, besides the size, the GDP per capita is like 10, 15 times one to the other. But the other, Philippines is growing probably 4 times faster than Philippines in GDP, total GDP. So you have a completely different dynamic. You have a completely different demographics. Singapore is more mature. Is one of the Asian tiger. Philippines is like growing. This is the time for Philippines. And from our point of view of like selling luxury, in this case cosmetics to them, is also very different maturity of the consumer. Besides the GDP per capita, the spending income, is the maturity and sophistication of the consumer that obliges you to have a completely different approach to one to the other. When we approach these countries, I mean, Estee Lauder has been basically in all these countries for many years, but the approach has always been like by potential. No? Look at what is the current potential and the short, medium term potential, and then based on that, you decide what is the business model. So the tendency for these companies is like when you approach a country that is developing, like let's say Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar. Right now, you go in with like maybe a local partnership, or you try a distributor. You don't go straight with a direct investment, and at some point when the country starts picking up very strongly, like what is happening right now with Indonesia or Philippines, then is the time you switch to a more direct approach and distribution. And I might be anticipating the next question. One of the challenges also in these countries is also the environment, the regulatory environment. So I'm not very aware of how it is in banking or B2B, but for us, for instance, on cosmetics, besides the issue of registration, we in many of these countries, as they are still less developed and less open, I would say, trade agreements, etc. There is some very serious limitations for foreign entities to run business there, to run B2C business to consumer businesses. So you always need to go in through a local partner, and that actually is one of the biggest barriers, one of the difficulties, and also one of the things that obliges you to have a different setting somehow when you go in. So you have all these different elements, and the diversity, I would say, I completely agree, is the biggest factor to describe it.
So yeah, so it seems like it's a common theme across, right? So this is about the diversity. You cannot implement the exact same strategy across different countries. So I think maybe we'll go back a little bit. It's just kind of to get a sense of, this it seems like I think we discussed a lot of challenges and really seem to converge in terms of like what is a common challenge. But like from your company perspective, like what is the attraction or a motivation for the business to be in ASEAN? Like, from your company's perspective, maybe more from the city or maybe Estee Lauder standpoint. I mean, entities, in Philippines. So, but like for global company, why ASEAN is such a place to be? So can we talk a bit more about that? Maybe come back to Brendan.
Yeah, look, ASEAN is it's where growth is happening. Asia is a strong growth region in general, and then ASEAN within Asia is an incredibly strong growth region as well. So it's sort of like one of the fastest growing geographic sectors of Asia, and it has a lot of when we look at it from a banking perspective, it's really just getting started. There, I mentioned Singapore is like 98% banked, but in markets like Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, looking at like maybe 30, 40, 50% banked. So, and the middle class is just going to be growing, not exponentially, but growing very, very rapidly across ASEAN as Indonesia, Philippines, and Thailand continue on this torrid growth path that they have. Vietnam is it's just incredible to see what's happening. Actually, I wish I lived in Ho Chi Minh City. It's much more exciting. It's much more fun than Singapore. Singapore is quite boring, actually. It's like very small. My favorite city in ASEAN that of the countries we cover is actually, it's not Bangkok, but it's Ho Chi Minh City is just vibrant. Wow. And you have a sense of, I spent some time in Europe as you mentioned, and I think Alfonso, can commiserate with me. In Europe, Europe is a little bit, there's a sense, especially in countries like Belgium and Portugal, where I worked, that it's like the best days are behind you, and they're just kind of fighting to maintain what they have, right? And whereas in Asia, and actually this was true in Poland as well, Eastern Europe was very Asian in its mentality, but like in Korea and in ASEAN, people know, they firmly believe that tomorrow's going to be better, and their kids will have a better life, and things are getting better every single day. So I think for Citi to be able to play a role in helping that progress. I'm a consumer banker, but on the corporate banking side, we're in all these markets as well. So to play a role in helping these markets develop and to help play a role in establishing the standards for banking and helping these economies grow and consumers realize their full potential. That's something that we're excited to play a part in.
I agree with that. Sorry, I hope I'm not leapfrogging Poch. It's like, it's not very different from the US. Now, if you're an executive working in the US and in Europe, if you're growing like above 1% a year, you're a hero. Here, maybe US a little bit more because you have a demographic boom in the US, kind of mini boom. You don't have that in Europe. And so for me, the shock was like, okay, and that requires very kind of granular approach to the market. And if I can, sub-segment the category and then go 2-3 levels below, and then if I gain 3 points there, then I can add maybe 0.2 points to my growth now. And then I go to China, and the whole market starts growing 40% for 6 consecutive quarters. And that requires a completely different approach in some sense to the market, but also to managing the people, right? While if you're in a more mature market, I hope I'm not going off the track now, but if you're a much more mature market, you need to manage people, say like you really need to be very disciplined on cost and disciplined in like how you segment the market and where. Well, if you go in these markets, it's like let them go, let them run, and land grabbing, as Brenda was saying. So when you back to your question, Anocha, I think any company, especially the listed companies in the street, they are looking for 2 things basically. They need to deliver 2 things. They need to deliver profit and growth, right? And so when you look at your company as a portfolio, and you have it as a portfolio of course, of brands, and you have to have a balanced portfolio from that point of view. But also, if you look at balanced portfolio geographies, I mean, in which country, region of the world you can extract like double-digit growth, number one. Number two, on sizable countries. That's the other thing. So I'm sure you can get, like in Ecuador, great growth, but it's how many people is that now, right? Then you go to Asia, and then you have Indonesia, 250 million people, right? You go to Philippines, is not 100. You go to Thailand, is that 80? And then you apply a growth on that, and that as Brenda was saying, you don't get in any other part of the world.
Yeah.
And just let me reinforce that a bit. Coming from the technology side of things, that's essentially what we do, and we do operate across Asia Pacific. So we're a global IT services provider, headquartered in Japan, and in the past year has been tough overall. This whole pandemic has really affected many businesses, but in the Philippines and across Asia Pacific, at least from on our side of things, on entity data, there's been a rapid growth in business. So that echoes the appetite of companies and the state of companies here in Asia Pacific. We are really in a region where a lot of hyper growth is happening. A lot of businesses are expanding rapidly, and businesses will need cash management services from Brendan and company. And I think this part of the world is in a very early stage in development, and a good place to do business in. And what has happened recently, everybody now is able to and much more. We've gone through exercise of learning how to engage remotely beyond borders. So you can companies not only present in ASEAN, but companies maybe somewhere in Europe or in Asia can start looking at providing services to ASEAN companies, and such as the world has come to this setup now, and it's a whole new different perspective and way of doing business. So ASEAN is in the next few years projected to grow still, in spite of this hump that we hit. We'll go back to growth trajectory upwards in the years to come.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, so it's great to hear. So this is great. I guess we talk about these strategic challenges. We talk about the motivation. Maybe we'll touch on, before we move, we're going to talk about, technology and stuff a little bit more, but let's talk about cultural aspects a little bit. So maybe if you could share with us, from your experience, any anecdotes about, challenges with respect to cultural differences. Or actually, we can also talk about, one thing we haven't touched on is like operations, from operation standpoint, from cultural standpoint, any anecdotes in terms of challenges you face when you work in ASEAN market?
Well, I think in ASEAN, you get a diverse set of cultures. And one example is I'm privileged to be in a position where I became part of a startup organization. This same company that I'm part of for 20 years now, we started back in 1999 as a local organization providing IT services. And we've grown the company organically for the next 16, 17 years until NTT found us and acquired us 2016. And for me, coming from a domestic corporation with Philippine operations, and now being exposed to multinational, multicultural environment, at first was big adjustment for me. One example would be our head office in Japan. It's very different as far as I would say it's more of a hierarchical, and the decision making goes from one level all the way up to the next. And I would say turnaround time normally will take a while, as opposed to in other areas, it's going to be pretty straightforward. But that's just the way things are, and I think it's being aware and about these different cultural differences. And you respect those differences, and adapt to engaging different people across the region, and that is exactly what we experience and learn to do. But when I say just accept and work properly, doesn't mean you if the pace is, for example, slower than usual, doesn't mean you have to work slower at the same pace, right? So the cultural thing is one way, operational aspects is another. In the end of the day, you're part of the bigger organization, aligned with the mission and vision and objectives of the bigger organization. But at the same time, you run, in my case, I run a unit, focus on one country, and we adjust towards serving our domestic clients, but at the same time we provide services to our customers around Asia Pacific and beyond, European customers as well, US based customers, to our offices in these regions. So it's an important piece, and in many ways we definitely take this very seriously. When we engage customers in different regions and different cultures, it's part of the onboarding of our teams and project teams. That's part of the agenda, on proper ways and means in engaging the customers, in the target region or country.
I can build with some little anecdotes that are more fun. I mean, on what Poch just said, it's really the understand. Sorry, I'm just flashed out. The first ray of sun in the last month has popped up in the
afternoon to you.
But yeah, it's great to see the sun again. Yeah, it's exactly what Poch was saying, like recognizing, respecting the cultural differences. I mean, it's just it really is not much more than really going there and in the markets and be open to that. So for instance, in cosmetics, let me give you an example. Malaysia is a Muslim country. So if you sell into salons, the area of men and women must be separated. A lot of claims on body products like refreshing, energizing, etc., forbidden, because I suppose they could have like a kind of sexual side to it. Talking about that, this is not Asian, it's Japan. Tom Ford, we had a perfume which is called Fucking Fabulous. You cannot use that word in Japan. So it was only fabulous in Japan. Well, another story, let me think. Another anecdote was fantastic. Was in May 2014, I was on a business trip in Thailand. And that night, a coup happened. So the military took over the government. And, you freak out for a moment. And then the GM of Thailand calls you and says, like, don't worry, this is the 20th coup since the World War II. So just stay in your hotel and don't do silly things. So but yes, the diversity, right? Is understanding, recognizing, and not judging with your own value set. I think is pretty straightforward as a recommendation.
Yeah, I think the ASEAN culture is fantastic. But I came from Korea. So my first day in Korea, the union was out in their vests and headbands and drums with signs telling me to go home. And they would routinely come to my office and just yell at me. And finally, like at one point in Korea, I asked them, I said, like, I just finally said, like, why do you guys yell at me all the time? And we would actually go out and have beers, and I would ask them, like, why do you do this? And they say, well, it's my job. Like, if I don't yell at you, then people get upset because they think I'm being lazy for not yelling at you. So then you get to be friends with everybody, right? But the culture, like Korea, I've been through some tough culture countries like Korea, Poland. Those are tough. Like ASEAN is great compared to Korea, I think. But yeah, I think the hardest thing, we tend to draw a segment of employee that is, and I think this is probably true for Estee Lauder as well, that's more interested in multinational and more international perspective. So I would say there's more similarities of city employees working across countries than you would think, because we sort of self-select for people that have that aspiration. But I do think one of the big challenge we have, and it's not just in ASEAN, it's in the US as well, is really getting people to disagree. And to say, like, if I always ask people, I say, like, is this a dumb idea? Like, I think maybe we should do this. Is this a dumb idea? And they just like, and sometimes you're just like, no, they would never tell me that it was a dumb idea. In Korea and Poland, they would absolutely tell me it was a dumb idea. Like, even if I didn't ask, they would tell me. So there is some of that hierarchical, just respect. People call me boss in Korea. Like, they don't call me, they just say, hey, boss, which is very strange to me. But yeah, but I think the culture in ASEAN is very open, but differences between countries, but it's very open and very proactive and very dynamic. It's a great place to have a career.
I really like your last point about, like, one of the challenges is how to get dissent out, right? Because out of dissent is how you improve and you don't hit the wall, right? And I mean, honestly, personally, I do like better the ASEAN culture. Like, you don't, I mean, it's like in Italy, for instance, you fight with everybody will disagree with you every time. Salesman 3 levels below you, sales meetings, say no, disagree. That's not a good idea.
Even if you agree, you fight in Italy, I think.
Sorry?
Even when you agree in Italy, you still fight, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
And the bravado.
And you have this kind of testosterone cultures, like, I need to show them strong, etc. Then you go to Asian, and there is like a much more respectful culture, and a 20% more respect of hierarchy makes things a little bit easier. Problem is when it goes beyond that threshold, you have a lot of people nodding to you, but that's just acknowledging they listening to you. And I mean, where this is really extreme is maybe Japan, but also like, but in general, I think it's a common trait. And I think in my experience, the way around it is that you need to work. I mean, it's like a theater. The meetings as a theater. You need to have prepared behind the scenes, and it's a one-to-one. And Brenda was saying, I mean, brilliant. Your solution to the trade unions is the only way to solve a problem in Korea, which is go and drink soju with them and get completely trashed. And the more trashed you get, the more respect you get from there. So yeah, see, I think it's a wonderful example of like adapting to. I know we're getting a little bit outside Asian, but it's I think it's a common trait, and I really like the idea, the thing that getting the dissent out, it's a big problem actually.
Great. Yeah, no, this is good. Thanks so much. So let us pivot a little bit to slightly different topic, but I think this will be of interest to the audience as well. But as we know, there's a big trends on like big data, business analytics, artificial intelligence, and all that stuff, and all these big words. From your perspective, how do you think the ASEAN is embracing and taking advantage of these development? And also, maybe if you can talk a little bit about how your company has implemented these technology in the ASEAN market. So the first one is, how do you see ASEAN market capitalizing on these new development, and what do your company or what has your company have done?
Yeah, look, I think ASEAN is, from a fintech perspective, ASEAN is crazy. I mean, it's just, I mean, I think Indonesia alone has something like 15 unicorns. tech unicorns. I mean, it's Tokopedia, Traveloka, Gojek. It's just amazing. Then we have, there's digital bank licenses going out everywhere. So Singapore has a digital bank license. There's a company called C, which owns Shopee, and Garena, which is a gaming company. They just got a bank license a digital bank license in Singapore, and they bought a bank in Indonesia. So it's basically like Amazon bought a bank in the U.S. And they're going to start doing some interesting things. So it's really, I think it's really, it's a hotbed for fintech innovation in ASEAN. The challenge we have is that from the strategy increasingly, I think banks and other companies, we have to integrate into these ecosystems. So there's in China there's a WeChat ecosystem. There's an Alibaba ecosystem, Tencent ecosystem. Grab here in Singapore is trying to be a super app and build their own ecosystem. Gojek is competing with them, and maybe Gojek and Tokopedia are going to merge. So the challenge we have is that, and this is sort of like strategy and culture, these countries have so much scale and innovation that there's no one ecosystem, there's no Google that's across every market. There's no Amazon that's across every market. Like, the ecosystems are very, very country specific. And Grab is huge in Singapore and trying in other markets. Gojek is huge in Indonesia and trying in other markets. And like it's really bifurcated. And it's not like, in the US, I get jealous of my colleagues in the US because 300 million people, you do one deal with Google, you're covering the whole United States, and you do Amazon, you're covering the whole United States. And like Amazon here is like nothing. They were, they're getting crushed by Lazada and Shopee. So like I think that there's so much innovation going on, but it's not for us as a operating in multiple countries. There's no global network effect that we get. Some, but not much. Like a lot of the business and the partnerships and the integration into those ecosystems is still very, very local. You have to be in the right app with the right partner. In Philippines, it's like Gcash, is huge, and but Gcash doesn't really exist in other markets, or doesn't have the same scale. So it's like we still we can build the platform centrally and leverage them. But integrating those platforms, it's really on a country by country basis where we have to say, okay, who are the big players here, and how do we make ourselves relevant to consumers in these markets? I mean, it used to be in banks, as a bank, to be relevant, you needed to have a branch on the high traffic streets, right, so people could see you. Now the digital equivalent is you need to have a placement in the high traffic ecosystem where customers are going every day. And that really varies from country to country.
On my side, let me share a couple of things. On question around technology and the use of big data, analytics, and AI, we have just recently completed a project that we did for Coca-Cola. I can mention the name now because we just launched completed a video case study. I can share the link to the video later for everybody to take a look at. But essentially what we did was enhance their HR capabilities. Here in the Philippines, they have about 12,000 employees. But this project span across whole of Asia Pacific and part of Middle East. And what we have allowed them to do is to have a much more deeper understanding of their personnel across Asia Pacific, how they're doing, why are these set of personnel doing things faster and better than the others. And it has allowed them to really create more fine-tuned programs for their personnel as far as training and development is concerned. And not only that, because of the sheer amount of volume of data, they are now able to do things that that's impossible to do if coming from a operations before where they're using different systems in different countries. So it is really just amplifying the differences in culture. So different implementations in different countries, they're not able to leverage on what's going well in one and shipping out to the other countries for the operations across the globe to benefit from. And I think that's one example of the use of technology. Another example is pretty close to what has been happening in the recent past, this pandemic. As a technology provider, we are actually been rolling out solutions related to COVID detection. We have produced a system that allows you to detect. So it's an X-ray based, low frequency X-ray based system that uses AI in the back end to predict, to give you a probability of whether someone's infected with the virus or not. And detection rate is detection processing time is about 3 minutes all in all from scanning to result. And it's getting faster and better as as it learns to predict and as we scan as the volume of people we scan piles up. And that's one great example of how automation and use of AI can really benefit society and companies across the globe. And that's just one couple of examples, and many more applications as you can imagine.
Yeah. So on my side, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. So sorry. So I just have one quick follow-up question because I thought it's interesting, Poach. So you scan people to kind of detect COVID? Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Like
it's an X-ray. The latest device that we use is just like a size of a camera, a digital camera, right? About this big, about 3-inch by 4-inch by 2-inch dimension, and it's just set up in such a way that probably about 3.5 feet height, and when somebody stands across it, it takes a an X-ray of one, but very low frequency. So no issues with doing that scan many times, and that image is then processed using AI technology up in the cloud. In 3 minutes, you're done. So you can go to triage if there's a problem, or you can go through through the gate, for example.
interesting. I see. So you look for the
If
X-rays. You
everything's
X-ray
okay.
inside the body. I see.
Yeah,
Cool.
the lungs, the chest area.
Wow. Okay. Wow. That's amazing. Alfonso?
yeah. No, I was saying like, of course, out of the three, probably I'm the one that comes from the least technological business. So for us, our experience with with AI and technology is a lot of the work, and I'm gonna come to Asia in a second. A lot of the work we did with Alibaba in China, with Tmall. I had the experience of launching a brand in China only through Tmall, and it was astonishing. I mean, what we could do with big data. Basically, they track all the 900 million people. They know everything about them and what is the consumer journey, etc. Why I'm saying this today? Because then what happened is that then Alibaba a few years ago they bought Lazada in Asia, and now and basically from a place where you could buy your rice cooker, basically is becoming kind of more like a place where you can buy also like luxury products, and you have a very good customer experience, etc. And what they're doing, they're starting, not yet there, and not always successful, but starting to replicate the business model and the use of the use of big data they do in China, also across the Asian markets, as you know, Lazada is a multi-country platform in Asia. So that's kind of my experience, and it was really an eye opener of what you can do if you have so much data about the consumer and how efficiently you can target them now. Because the problem for us is always like to identify what is the target consumer and how much of your advertising money is wasted on trying to figure it out now with what they are. While with such a big amount of data, you can really very efficiently get the consumer that is more likely to be the one that is going to buy your products.
Thank you. So yeah, so I guess that, you know, in fact, Poach already kind of tapped into, you know, the topic we're going to discuss in our last question already, but I guess that's okay. But let me, so last one, it's basically it's a topical area that we can discuss. It's about COVID-19, right? So I think that might be on top of mind. Some of the people in the audience might wonder like how companies are dealing with the pandemic and, you know, what kind of obstacles that these pandemic, you know, bring about to your company and how you adapt to this disruption. And maybe you can talk about, you know, maybe if you use the technology to try to resolve the issue, how do you do that exactly? I know Poach already, you know, started off some of the stuff already early on, but maybe let's see what Brandon has to share with us in terms of pandemic and how you deal with it.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. You know, banking is already. I mean, I could survey. I think I could survey. You know, the people on this call. Like, when was the last time you went to a bank branch willingly? And the answer is probably never, right? So you know, we were seeing, you know, banking was, you know, rapidly changing anyway and becoming much more digital. Sort of like, you know, what happened with music is happening with banking now. You know, like my daughters they've never bought a CD. They kind of don't know what CDs do. Like, they're like, didn't you have Spotify? You know, like why would you buy music? That seems very strange to them. And I think, you know, for, you know, maybe this generation and younger, they're going to say like, what do you mean you went to a bank? You went to a bank? Like, what does that mean? Like, didn't you just go into the app? So we were seeing already huge digitization of changes in customer behavior. It's not even us driving it. It's just us keeping up with what customers want. So like in 2018, maybe about a third of our customers were active in our app every 30 days. That increased to almost 50% in 2019. So it was already growing very rapidly. And then in 2020, it's more like 65%. So I think COVID helped a little bit. It nudged some people that otherwise would have been just out of habit. They, you know, had a habit of going to the branch. It nudged them into trying digital because for a long time during our circuit breaker in Singapore and the movement control measures in other markets, we were closing branches and minimizing. And regulators were saying, if you can do it digitally, you have to offer it digitally. So we did see some increased, a slightly increased adoption, but it was happening anyway. So most customers today, they don't come to the branch for a basic transaction. They do those on the app. Less than 1% of our transactions happen in branches. It's really, if it's more of a complicated transaction, like you want to get advice about investing or, you know, retirement or even, you know, life insurance, like then you maybe want to talk to an expert and have some explanation about, because these are more complicated products. So our physical locations are really reserved for those kind of discussions now, and everything else is really on the app. And actually, if you go to a branch today and you say you want to open an account, we say, well, can you pull out your phone and we'll help you open the account on your phone. So we don't have paper forms, you know, we don't have multiple different processes. We're like, because we could, in Singapore, you can open an account in about 3 minutes on the app. So why would we have a paper form that takes us, you know, several days and have somebody fill it out? So we just help, you know, we have an app-based account opening process for everyone, even the people who do happen to visit us in the branch. So I think that's how we've been adapting to COVID. Work-wise, staff-wise, yeah, we're working from home. We're probably 60-70% of my team, including myself, are working from home. I go in maybe a couple days every other week, but it's more just because I need to get out of the house. It's not because I have to. In City, we had our own internal video conferencing system called City Meet, which was awful. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, we finally it woke everyone up. We said, okay, let's use Zoom, and we did an API with Zoom. And so now for all of our internal meetings, there's like a city.zoom API, and we're using Zoom for all of our internal meetings as well. Client meetings, even on the investment banking side, we don't travel. Like, we still have a global travel ban except for essential travel. So even for big multi-billion-dollar pitches for investment bankers, we do it by Zoom. So I think it's had less impact on how our customers bank, because they were doing that anyway, but it's had a profound impact on how our bankers work.
Yeah. So actually, just one tiny bit of a follow up is that, like, you said that some of the customers still might need to talk to like their consultants about insurance or about investment. For those type of activities, do they do it online now through Zoom or anything like that?
You can normally we can do those sessions through Zoom, and we have like what we call our authorization corner. So I can, as your RM, I can talk to you. I can say, hey, this is what we recommend. Do you agree? You say, yeah, let's agree. And then I push you a notification through the app, and you just go tick, 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 yes, and it's done. So we can do that remotely. And actually we use that face-to-face as well, because it's paperless, right? So even if I'm talking to you face-to-face, I'm still going to push that to the app, and then you, rather than pull out big reams of paper, you still authorize that. So it's the same process whether you're face-to-face or over Zoom. A lot of times our RMs, for high net worth customers, they visit. So I'll go to your office or I'll go to your home to do that consultation as well. But certainly, yeah, a lot of our customers have taken more advantage of those remote interactions as well.
Okay, great, thanks. So any of you, Poach, Alfonso, who wants to jump in on COVID?
I mean, for me, I can talk probably not much about the slaughter because I was already out of the company when COVID arrived. So it's more related to my job as a consultant and with my own consulting company. And it's like, it goes a little bit two ways. On one side, I think, I mean, running projects, no problem. As Brendan was saying, running, remotely, no problem. I mean, I have a client who, actually, for a big project, I never met them in person. So it's just in September when there was a little bit of a moment, we finally had a coffee, etc. We started and we ran the project with that. I think, however, a little bit more difficult in all the pitching or even pre-pitching process, meaning like, okay, great, you can, and not disagree with you, Brendan, but like you can definitely do the pitch, but then all that phases of like approaching people, like potential clients, and building the trust, the relationships, that is a little bit slower right now, and it's more difficult. On the other side, I think what compensates this, in my case, which is a business consultancy about going into Asia for Western companies. The fact that basically everything came to a standstill last spring in Europe, and especially in Italy, we were very, very much the first ones in the Western world. And with all the looming recession coming to our markets, everybody's realizing that they need to go into Asia and to find that growth we were talking about before. So, fun enough, there is an acceleration of like investments from companies in moving in looking at Asia, China and Asian countries to be able to derive some growth there. So it's there is this double impact somehow. Now, one side is a little bit more difficult to start the relationship. On the other side, there is definitely a more clear need that they're not going to get any growth out of the Western market, so they really need to go into Asia.
So basically, the people still think that there's a need for consulting, work still, right? Because there's still some opportunities.
Yeah.
So even
No,
with
no.
COVID,
Actually, that's probably is the most precious and sophisticated technology we have on our planet, which is the know-how of people and their brain power. So that's still, funny enough, there is still some need for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So actually, I had a chance to talk to some consulting companies in the US as well. And when the first COVID hit, they said like they saw a drop in the in their clients because they try to save costs. And then later on, they just realized that, hey, this is a time for us to do research project, because we need to figure out how to be nimble and how to deal with the situation rather than saving costs from research or consulting. So
my
yeah.
vantage point is very small. It's very, very, very limited. But I never had so much. I was never so busy, to be honest, over the last years. So, but it's a very, very limited sample.
Yeah.
I think that if there's a silver
Yeah.
lining in this whole thing that has happened, I know it's tough, but I'd like to look at the positive side. If one thing we'll get out of this, I'm sure everybody will learn how to operate more efficiently, operate more, be more agile, and that's exactly what we see all over the world now, right? And just an example here in the Philippines, the toll roads here. The toll collections there's an electronic lane. Maybe if you see a few cars pop in and out of that lane, and everybody's doing the cash transaction, and it creates enormous amount of traffic jam all the time. Now everybody's mandated electronic, and I think things are a little more efficient. I think that nothing beats that as an example. And in our case, we have around 250 employees here servicing many companies across the Philippines. And part of that, to house our personnel, we need a huge footprint of real estate. But this allowed us to really think through. Maybe we don't need that much of a footprint, right? And we'd rather put in, give the right technology access to our personnel, and have them work remotely, maybe even beyond this whole situation, and maintain a small footprint. Overall, I think many of us will learn how to be more efficient.
For those of you who've never been to Philippines, traffic jams have 80 proportions in Philippines, to the point
Happy to say we're not the worst. We're second in
I think
Southeast Asia.
Indonesia.
Just
Okay.
checking all the names here. Yeah, it's
better
in Jakarta. Yeah.
Yeah.
I give them the award. Yeah.
So one last question, and we're going to open up, just follow up. I'm kind of curious about this COVID thing. People stay at home. It seems like from what Poch said, this trend might continue, right? So maybe people are used to it. Is that the same thing with you, Brandon, as well? That like after the COVID, will you come back to work at the brand or at the headquarters, or it's going to be more trend of people working remotely?
I think we're gonna, we're already looking at alternative work strategies, and I think COVID is just, I remember having these conversations. I said, like, we should do work from home a couple of days a week, and this was in like January of 2020, and like all my bosses were like, "It's crazy, that doesn't work." And then suddenly, within 2 months, we were all 100% at home, right? So now I think, the real question is how much, because I think either the extremes are bad. 100% in the office is unnecessary, but 100% from home is also you miss out on some stuff. You miss some of the team building, especially for new employees. That's the real critical, like onboarding new employees, passing along the culture. We do have a lot of apprenticeship, for new employees. So I think it's going to be a mix. So maybe 2, 3, 4 days a week from home. We want to see people like at least in the office once a week. And for some people, maybe 2 or 3 days a week, but then, maybe 2 or 3 days a week at home. And we're gonna pilot that and see how it works. I would say in Singapore it's easier, right? You know, you have good Wi-Fi, high-speed internet is relatively available. You know, what we see a lot is we have a call center in the Philippines, and we have some services provided out of India, and it's a real problem. Like you know, if the infrastructure is not there, the Wi-Fi can be very spotty. You know, if you don't have the size of the apartment or the house, working from home can be it can be unrealistic for a lot of employees, depending on the market and depending on the role. So we do have some call center employees that are trying to work from home, but it's just not very productive, and the calls are dropping because through no fault of their own, like the Wi-Fi drops, and then customers are left hanging. So we've seen customer satisfaction go down a bit. So we are looking at how do we think about that moving forward? How do we, what kind of support do we give? But it's not even. It's just like sometimes the high-speed internet is just not available, or quality high-speed, consistent high-speed internet is just not available in all the markets.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I think maybe it might be a good time for us to open up for the floor to ask questions, so then that way the audience can feel more engaged and can get to ask what they might want. So let me do this. I think the best way to do might be that if you would like to ask our panelists a question, you could raise your Zoom hand, and then I'll go through the list, first come, first serve. That way, just easy once I call you, and then you can unmute and ask the question yourself. Any Zoom hands? All right, first person, Danielle.
Yeah, hello. I have a question regarding, so last year we see the signing of a very significant trade agreement, which is the RCEP, and ASEAN is definitely playing a very major role in that deal. And as professionals who live in ASEAN countries and have direct contact with businesses in these countries, what effects do you think the new agreement is bringing, or perhaps have already brought? And are there a lot of optimism going on?
I think any of you can jump in.
The RCEP, Philippines is part of it. I think these types of trade agreements and really just scan the agreement. So I'm no way an expert of that the program, but overall I'm enthused about what it can bring for the country, and especially in the trade between the different countries involved. I understand there's quite a number as part of that program. So I view it in a very positive way, and should be in a position, should allow more open trade between the countries involved. So on our business, we're technology, we're all about technology and implementation. So I believe it will just open up things, and it'll be easier for us to provide services around these countries. So I think the main countries involved, I think I also see Cambodia, where in many ways we're trying to penetrate the market, and yeah, I see this agreement as a positive one as far as we're concerned. Thank you for that question.
RCEP is like 30% of the world's population and 30% of global GDP. I mean, it's massive. It's hard to understate, or overstate the dynamism we're already seeing in Asia, in ASEAN in particular. I think this is only gonna add to the growth prospects. It saddens me as an American to see the U.S. sort of stepping back, and hopefully maybe we'll change Trans-Pacific Partnership, maybe that'll come back to the fore. I'd like to see the U.S. playing a role, like in these trade partnerships as well. But no, I think it's definitely going to increase trade between this area of the world. It's going to increase the mix of it's going to help bring up the lower income countries. And the linkages between all these markets. I think it's going to be definitely a boost for business for sure.
I think it's it's the beginning of the journey, and it's still very much at the beginning of the journey. So I think it's very broad, and maybe there will be a lot of implementation that needs to be done after that, and more trade deals to actually make it explicit. I think directionally it's extremely encouraging, because the world in the last years has gone towards more, a recession of the previous trade partnership, etc. Led, but not just by the US, but so it's very encouraging to see that actually there are pockets in the world that actually they think otherwise, and they think that actually globalization is good, etc. And in some way, looking from an European perspective, it looks like it's the beginning of the same journey we started in Europe like 40, 50 years ago. And the European project was, firstly a political project because we wanted to avoid to have another war, but also it was basically, and this started kicking in only in the 90s, the beginning of the 90s, realizing that no country can have the economies of scale to actually compete on a global basis. We had the US, you guys in Asia have China next to it, and while of course you have 100 million people in Philippines, 250 in Indonesia, it's really about that when you put them together with 650 million and without barriers, you do achieve the economies of scale for any good champion in a country to be able to compete with China. So directionally, I think it's really, really good. I personally think it's really the beginning of the journey for
And look, I think one of the things you see the US, you see the UK, pulling back, and it's because the globalization has not been uniformly good for Americans. There's significant portions of the population that have been left behind, but that's a policy choice we made, which is a mistake. We chose not to provide support and transition and training to make sure that we bring everyone with us, so that global trade benefits everybody. We just sort of said, oh, there's winners and losers, and if you're a loser, then so be it. I think that happened in the UK. I think it happened to a certain extent in Europe, and certainly in the US, and that's where Trump, Brexit, all these forces pushing against globalization and trade have come from. So I'm hoping that with RCEP, like we can learn those lessons and make sure that it has to be good for everybody. And there's gonna come a point where some subsectors of the populations in various countries are going to be hurt by trade, and figuring out how to make sure that we spread the benefits and share them even with the ones that are adversely impacted by globalization. I think that's going to be a key towards keeping these barriers down.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I cannot agree more. And it's because if you look at Brexit, it's like almost saying, oh, well, it's yes or no, we should go to globalization, etc. Well, it's a matter of how, as you say, and I would guess also a matter of speed. Maybe it was too fast somehow. That didn't allow like half a generation to pass while this happened. So people that suddenly found themselves on the wrong side of history, they were out of the job. And so it's maybe in Asia it can be learned that maybe do it a little bit by step can actually ensure the transition. On the other side, the great advantage you have in Asia is like the demographics. Right, so you have take Malaysia, 75% of the population is below 50, 50% of the population is below 25. So they are in the right side of demographics for having the right demographic to be able to learn the new skills that are needed in the globalization. While in the West we were exactly on the opposite side. It made it much more difficult.
All right, great. Any other questions on the floor? You could raise your Zoom hand again, and then I can call. All right. Second person, Bill. You can unmute and ask your question. Bill, we cannot hear you.
Oh, is not allowed to unmute. Okay.
Oh yeah, you can ask your question.
Okay, I can unmute now. Well, first of all, thank you so much for attending this panel today. So my question is, I think that one of the themes, the overarching themes at the beginning of this discussion that was used to describe Southeast Asia was, as you guys said, rapid growth in such a diverse region. I think, Brendan, for example, you described banking in Vietnam as a land grab. And I think we've talked about, incredible rises of many unicorns. And but at the same time, I think we've also seen that a lot of companies that are experiencing this rapid growth is also faced with a lot of challenges, whether that be in company culture or whether that be in customer satisfaction or just operational issues. And I assume those different challenges are different across, for example, professional services compared to consumer goods as well. So my question is, what challenges or issues or trade-offs do you guys see in your industry or company that are associated with this rapid growth? And do you guys foresee the strategies of approaching this to be different across countries in Southeast Asia?
I can maybe further expand on what I was saying before. So if you manage a business in the West, in Europe or US, you really need to really do a very, very granular job of like elaborating subsegments and subcategories, and then try to gain a little bit of market share there. When you go to these fast developing countries, it requires a different skill set for the people, because it's really like it's like almost a gold rush. So you need to go there, and I mean, I like to tell the story of the retail. Now in retail, I mean, how many new shopping malls there are in the US in the last 10 years? Well, it's a negative number. They're dying. No, how many new shopping malls there are in Philippines, in Thailand, etc. I mean, it's like they mushroom, and around them there are new neighborhoods where all this emerging middle class comes up. So it's people that to manage this, you need a completely different skill set of people that go there. For instance, in our case, real estate capabilities, sniffing around where opportunities, etc. And I would like to add, you need a different skill set also from the managers, because as a manager coming, senior manager coming from the West, you need to get out of this kind of habit, of managing kind of micro. It's not micromanaging, but it's micro running a business, and you need to leave a much more higher degree of freedom. So to these people, like in Southeast Asia and Asia, you cannot really kill them with asking them reports and too much of an analysis. What you need to ask them is to challenge them on the growth and to finding business opportunities. So it's two ways now. It's the capability of the people that are running the business, the capability of the people that are running these people that need to adapt to the different market condition, which is a high growth.
I'd like to jump from that similar topic from Alfonso. On my perspective, as far as the technology company or technology provider is concerned, so professional services, as Bill mentioned, our challenge really is to serve this rapidly growing marketplace. It's really the availability of resources, people, skilled resources, consultant profile, because more and more we will need people to really drive conversations with their customers, and on top of that, given this whole situation, we will now have new forms of engaging our customers. This is one form, and through using use of say applications, apps, and even in social media aspects. It's also a different channel to engage your customers. And really, it's while we try to serve as much as we can, to serve the rapidly growing marketplace for technology. It's also a challenge for us and we always challenge ourselves to in the aspects of disruption, come up with a whole new. You have to always begin sometimes with a perspective of or a point of view of the future, right? New industries forms because of catalysts such as the pandemic now. You probably have seen some commentary on how Tesla disrupted the auto industry, and now they're essentially a technology company. And how AI is being used rapidly in developing vaccines for COVID. Something that's not much. It's not been used in the past legacy way of creating medicines and vaccines. So really, it's on the professional services side. It's a people economy and of course, education aspects will also play a very important role. That segment will also play a very important role to prepare students and graduates to as they go to this to the workforce and join organizations in the coming years.
Yeah, for City, we have businesses in the U.S., Latin America, Europe, and Asia, and some of the biggest challenges I have is that our Philippines business is growing at 15% year on year. Well, it was before COVID, but in Philippines we're losing share every day. So like we're growing 15% and we're losing. So it's actually not good, right? Because the market's growing faster than we are. But then when I go to the mothership in New York and I say, hey, my revenue is growing 15%, my expenses are growing 10%. They're like 10% expense growth. That's crazy. The mindset of dealing with sort of our dominant business is in the U.S. and just that colors everything. And so that for them looking at, hey, how could you possibly be growing your expense base by double digits? And I said, look, our revenue is growing even faster, and I have 5% positive operating leverage, but just getting that through is just sometimes it can be very, very difficult. So I think to Alfonso's point, you need a different mentality when you're dealing with the growth market. You can't be pinching pennies and nitpicking. You've really got to just be grabbing share with discipline and with ongoing monitoring of am I getting the right payback? Am I getting the right returns on these investments I'm making? But sometimes it can be very difficult to get the funding that we need to grow faster or to grow comparable with or more than the market. That's a challenge.
Nosha, you're on mute.
Yeah. So given that this is, I don't see any hands, and we have about 10 minutes, 9 minutes left. So let me wrap up with the last question to see if each of you might have any advice or a piece of wisdom to share with the audience in terms of what they should think about or what they should prepare for if they want to work with the ASEAN market or want to be in the ASEAN market and working there. Any word of advice?
Well, I think let me begin. The ASEAN as a market, as everybody's talked about already in this session, it's a rapidly growing market, and it's if you want some good action, you should take a look at working and being part of this market. But I think, of course, good education is very important. So, and I think, and this is I think very close to my heart. I did the executive program in 2007, and it really changed my life. And so put so having a good base as far as education is concerned, the network that you build uh, as part of being part of school like University of Michigan is very important and something that you should treasure and cherish as you move along and participate in the marketplace. But yeah, and ASEAN is where I would say the action is right now as far as rapid growth is concerned, and there's a lot of reasons why one would I would encourage one to take a look at the prospects here in ASEAN.
Yeah.
You see, I think maybe
The one
Brandon.
here, Alfonso?
Yeah, well, to me, it's like going back to what we discussed at the beginning about the diversity in Asian. So my only advice for any of you that are going to live and travel there is that to be to be open and to embrace this diversity. Okay, so don't judge it. I know it's very normal when you go to live in a different culture to make comparison. It's great, you can do it, but just embrace it. Try to understand them first. Don't judge, and don't definitely judge with your schemes. Like for instance, if you go to China or to some extent in Singapore, it's not necessarily people think that democracies are the most effective way of running politics. So really try to understand first and embrace it. And also, if you think life is an adventure, this area of the world is definitely an adventure. So it's an incredible journey to be able to enjoy the culture, to understand them, and do show interest towards it. And the second thing advice I want to give you, and it's not, please don't take it as an advertisement, but it's something that I really enjoyed in Asia. Actually the network of the alumni of Michigan is really strong in Asia. It's there. I think there is 5,000 plus. We used to do these Asian reunions. There is more than 1,000 people coming from all. It's every year across in a different country. It's an amazing network. So stay. I mean, my recommendation. Nobody asked me to say that, but it's stay connected to the University of Michigan because it's a really good network in Asia.
Yes, I grew up. Not only did I go to University of Michigan, I grew up about a half an hour away. So I grew up. I'm from Livonia, Michigan, and now I live in Singapore, which is crazy. No, look, I think if you're looking to work and look, you can make a great career globally. I mean, there are challenges and opportunities globally. I think ASEAN is a great place to be right now. There's a lot happening. From digital fintechs, trade, economic growth. There's just, pick your country, and things are just really growing really rapidly, and it's a fun place to be. So I think if you're looking to come work in ASEAN, obviously if you're from here, I think you have a leg up. But it is there's just a lot happening, and I think understanding what's where the venture money is going and where the investments are going, and just reading up on what companies are making moves. There's I think it would be a great time to grab into one of these companies. Could be Citi, could be Estee Lauder, could be NTT, or it could be a lot of some of these other companies that are really booming right now. I think it's just come and make a go of it. I think anytime you play it safe, you're probably not maximizing your opportunities. So be bold, take some risks, and usually things work out.
Yeah, and if I may add, you can.
Sorry.
Yeah, actually, sorry. Actually, I just got a message. It seems like there's some technical difficulty. They want me to end at 9:25, so it's already 2 minutes later. So, Great. I think it's 2 minutes to be fine. Sorry, I didn't keep an eye on the chat, but thanks for the panel. All the panelists today. It's a great conversation we have. Appreciate it. So thanks for the audience. So I guess we'll wrap up here. Thanks so much for your attention. All right. Bye.
Go
Thanks.
Blue.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
go
Go
Blue.
Blue.
Bye.